I believe that the price for a full life is mistakes. Mistakes are the price for a full life that you have to pay if you learn from them. I believe that hell wants to maim you and mock you with your mistakes. But heaven wants to make you and transform you by your mistakes. Failure should not become a prison house where you're held hostage the rest of your life by your mistakes. That's not God's voice. That's not God's will. That's not God's plan for you. And I'm not naive. My wife, who is here, whom I love more than anything in this world, my 5 children, my 3 grandchildren and growing. And I can't help but understand that the enemy wants us to think that our failure is final, because I've seen us go through things where the enemy tried to take us out by a failure or a mistake or a terrible choice. I want you to understand that your mistakes, and this is what I'm preaching on, if you need a sermon title, this is it. Your mistakes are not final. Your failure is not final. Rejoice not over me, O my enemies, for when I fall, I will rise again. When I sit in darkness, the light will come. I want somebody to hear me clearly. You might have made a mistake, but you're not one. You might have failed, but you're not a failure. You might be down, but down is not your destiny. There is a resurrection coming to your dream, to your life, to your call, to your purpose. You might, and here's what I really feel like saying. Just gonna go on and say it. Because the truth is, sitting among us are young men and young women who were here last forward. And between then and now, you've fallen. You've messed up. You did something. You wanted it. You had to have it. You had to try it. And you did it. You experimented with drugs and alcohol. And now you're addicted. You had to try. And now you've lost your purity or your virginity. And the enemy, if you could go back, you would give anything to go back and change that night or that place or that situation that changed everything in your life. I feel for this generation, because when I was coming up, pretty much if we stayed away from sin, for the most part, we were always tempted. We were flesh. We had all, but it's different for your generation, because if we stayed away from sin, sin basically didn't bother us. If you wanted pornography, you had to go to a 7-Eleven. You had to go to the guy at the counter. You had to tell him you want some porn in front of a bunch of people. While they're all waiting in line, they would all look at you like you were a perv. And then he would go back to a back shelf that was only behind the counter, and he would get you a porno magazine, and then before he would give it to you, he would say, "How old are you?" But this generation doesn't have that. Sin has become brazen and bold. Sin is stalking you. Sin is after you. I feel for you. I'm not here to throw stones. I'm not here to cut you down, because the truth is 68% of all men, according to the latest statistic, look at porn at least once a week. 18% of all women look at porn once a week. 1 out of every 5 searches on the web is porn related. So is that what we're going to talk about? No, that's not what we're going to talk about. Righteousness is not permission to sin, but righteousness is permission to come back home. You might have fallen and you might have failed and you might have made a mistake, but you are not a mistake. And God will never define you by the worst mistake and choice you made in life. Critics will, attackers will, haters will, people will, but God will never define you by your worst mistake. And I need you to thank Him that great is His mercy towards us. I love the story of Simon Peter. I love the fact that God loved him after he messed up. That's why when the angel appeared at the tomb, the angel said, Jesus wants me to specifically name one of the disciples by name. He said, go tell my disciples and Simon Peter to meet me in the upper room. The same guy who denied Christ, the same guy who lied, the same guy who cut a man and got violent, the same guy who fell and failed miserably. He said, you tell my disciples and you tell Peter. He named him specifically, I believe, because he wanted his critics to hear, I do believe in my good disciples, but I also still believe in my fallen disciples. And I'm here to preach to some people who've messed up and the enemy's told you your call is over, you're blessed, your dream is shredded, you don't have any hope, you don't have any future, but God brought you to this conference just to let you know that there is restoration available for you, and He still has His hand on your life. Take a praise break and thank Him. I'll keep moving. Isn't this something that it was Simon Peter who preached on the day of Pentecost? He didn't choose the other 11. He chose the one who messed up. There's a guy in Acts chapter 20 called Eutychus. And while he was preaching, this guy was in the third balcony. And he was sitting in the window. And he had, in other words, straddling the window. And he had 1 foot outside and 1 foot in the church. And he fell asleep and fell out of the church and fell down 3 stories. And everybody said he's dead. They sent some ushers to scrape his body up and go bury him. But I love the story of the Apostle Paul. The Bible said he left the church service where he was preaching and ran to that man named Eutychus. You know why his name was Eutychus? Because you'd have cussed too if you'd have fallen all the way out of the window. You cuss over But he fell all the way down, and they were ready to scrape him up and throw him away and say he's worthless. He was in church, serves him well. He shouldn't have been half in and half out. Let's just mark him off. He knew better. He got it. Listen, you might have got what you wanted, but you don't have to keep what you've got. You serve a God who says, I make all things new. Come on and shout with me just a minute. Praise Him just a minute. I feel something stirring in here. Just praise Him just a minute. I love what Paul said. The Bible said Paul fell on him and he held him and he said these words, there's still life in him. And that's what I've come to prophesy and preach to tonight, that some of you have fallen, some of you did it, some of you messed up, but the Lord sent me to tell you there's still life in your dream. There's still life in your call. There's still life in your purpose. There's still life